Hello, everyone. My name is Randy Harrington, and if you've watched podcasts of mine over the years or listened to interviews that I've done, you may have heard me talk about a walkie-talkie incident. It's something that happened in the Kiamichi Mountains, an area where I've been doing research for 15 years or so, and as a matter of fact, the last presentation that I gave on my YouTube channel here about communications and behavior patterns was based on an area on a ridge just south of Honobia, Oklahoma. This all happened in that same area, and we call it the walkie-talkie incident. It happened in 2009. And I will just start the slide presentation and talk about it as we go. So here is an overview of the Kiamichi Ridge where I spent a lot of my time. And at the bottom of the picture there, you see the X, and that's the base camp that I explained in that last presentation about behaviors and communication. So that little X spot is the base camp area. But what you see in this overview is up in the upper right hand corner is the Kiamichi Christian uh, compound that they call Christ's 40 acres. So it's a 40-acre Christian compound where they have the Honubby conference every year. So it was the 2009 conference that we were scheduled to be a part of, and we were there 5 days early. So we were there a week early on a Monday. So it was the following weekend that the conference was going to take place, and we wanted to get down there and be the first ones there and make sure that when we were back in the mountains there that no one else was around. So there was about 5 or 6 of us, and we actually got there around 10 o'clock at night, 10 or 11 o'clock at night. So we took our vehicles, and I had a trailer with a Polaris in it and all of our camping equipment. We uh, we went to the Christ 40 acres, and that's where we uh, stationed our vehicles and had everything parked there and unloaded and prepared to go to the campsite. And you can see this red line going from the Christ 40 acres, weaving all the way up through the mountains there. Anyways, going to the campsite. So the next picture will show that was where we were starting. Is where we were unloading. So you can see that it's dark, and our vehicles are there. We've got the ATVs in the back of the trucks. We are just starting to unload things. That big white trailer in the background was my truck and trailer, and I had my Polaris in there. These two gentlemen in the picture here, the one scratching his nose, that gentleman's name is Roy, and the other gentleman with the green jacket on is named Dave. Though both of these gentlemen are instrumental in the things that happen in the next several days. Uh, so you might want to remember Roy and Dave. Roy has the blue hat on, and Dave has the camouflage hat on. So there's Dave unload. I'm not really showing his face. His face is kind of hidden. He was always very private man. Didn't want anybody. I'm not going to say his last name. Uh, you know, he didn't want his family being harassed or anything like that. He was kind of a private guy, but he enjoyed the Bigfoot uh, outings that we went on, and very nice gentleman from Missouri. So that was Dave, and then this is him. This is me with my Polaris loaded up, ready to go after we took everything out of my truck and got it on the Polaris. So I think there was 3 of us in my Polaris, and then Dave was on his ATV, and Roy was on his ATV. I don't know if there was another ATV or not, but so there was about 5 or 6 of us. Now here is a map showing, and you can see the yellow X is where the base camp was. So from the very top left corner is where the Christ 40 Acres was, and you can see the red trail as we wormed our way up that first ridge, came in there, and it's pretty steep. I'm going to go ahead and just follow it with the yellow line. But it would circle around there, and it starts to get really steep at this point. It really goes uphill. It's very rutty at this point. So there's a lot of ruts and steep. And when you get up to the top of the ridge here, you go along the top of the ridge, and then you immediately cut downhill. So weaved our way downhill, and this going downhill went just below our old campsite or the base camp. And then it cuts back up the ridge or straight down the ridge and then down and a couple of miles beyond that all the way back to this point here. Now that's where we ended up camping, and it's a spot that I had mapped out before, which gave us a really nice area. And so we'll go to the next picture, and that is the spot at the end of that red marker. That's where we ended up. You can see there was a little shelf there. There's a little shelf there, and that's where there was just enough space there to make a circle of tents with a pretty high wall here and a deep, deep, deep valley holler area in here. And I just thought it would be a good spot where if you're up there with a campfire, that anything way down here in this deep valley could just look over and see a little campfire going. So maybe, we'd draw some attention. So that's why I picked out that spot. So we'll go to the next picture. So here we were in that little shelf, and that back there is the deep, dark drop off into the valley that I thought we'd set up here on this shelf with a campfire, and so it was a good spot. And we didn't have a whole lot happen that night. That first night in, it was Monday night, and we may have heard some things in the distance. We may have heard some possible rocks coming in off the ridge above us. We may have heard some vocalizations, possibly way down in that valley, but nothing significant, nothing that you'd get too excited about. But when we got into this campsite and started unloading, Roy, the gentleman with the blue hat that I showed you earlier, he was a little bit flustered because he had lost a walkie-talkie, and he had just purchased these walkie-talkies. They were Motorola's, 36-mile Motorola's at the time. They were probably some of the better ones you could get. So he was quite upset, and Dave, the other gentleman, was still sitting on his four-wheeler when Roy and I was having this conversation about his walkie-talkie. And when I'm talking to Dave, I see under his foot, under his four-wheeler had a floorboard, not just a foot peg. Some four-wheelers had foot pegs. Some newer four-wheelers had floorboards. So he had a floorboard, but there was a piece of paper under his foot, and I just said, "Hey, Dave," I said, "you're losing stuff too." And I reached down and I yanked this, and he raised his foot, and I pulled this piece of paper out, which what I thought was a piece of paper, and flipped it over, and it was a photograph. And he goes, "What is that?" And took it from me and looked at it, and then he put his hand in his pocket and pulled out a cluster of 15 or so pictures. And he goes, "Oh man," he said, "I haven't wore this coat in 3 months or however long." And he said, "I just pulled it out of the closet and put it on. Didn't realize he had photographs in the pocket." And he's your typical grandfather. So he was at a school function in an auditorium where his grandchildren were at a talent show at school. So he was taking pictures from way back in the back row. So all of these pictures that he took was of the stage way down there, and all the pictures look the same because you they just all look the same. So looking at the pictures, you couldn't tell which one was different than the other because the the distance was so far away that he was taking the pictures that they all looked the same. So there's that story where he actually had a photograph that had fell out and was under his foot on his foot peg, and then he realized he had these in his pocket. So this item will come up later. But to continue the conversation about the walkie-talkie, Roy said, and Dave agreed that the next morning they would get up earlier than everybody else and retrace our trip into there where we were at so that they can look for that walkie-talkie. They were just going to go all the way back to Christ 40 acres and just kind of look on the sides of the trail and on the trail and see if they could find that walkie-talkie anywhere. So that happened the next day. Uh, they came back, no luck, so they couldn't find it anywhere. Uh, said they went really slow and really looked in the rough areas, the rough ruddy areas, thinking that that's probably where it was lost. But needless to say, they didn't find the walkie-talkie, and and we forgot about it after that. We didn't forget about it, but it was just no point in talking about it because I mean you lost a walkie-talkie. Things like that happen all the time. You're not good luck. I wouldn't waste too much time trying to find it because there's a 4 mile rough stretch that you'd really waste a lot of time trying to find a $20 item. So needless to say, we camped in a different spot that next night, and we eventually ended up a day or two later camping back at the base camp, which is the main camp that I talked about in the previous presentation. So the next base camp, well, the base camp area, here we are. This is later in the week when other people had arrived, getting closer to the day of the conference, and so that's the base camp area. That's where the Ridgewalker video was taken across the logging road from that campsite. And here's another picture of me and Dr. Meldrum sitting in the same base camp. And I believe this was all in 2009 because Dr. Meldrum was there speaking in 2009. So in this area, there was a long stretch where I was putting out baits with a photograph. Well, not a photograph, but a picture. And I had the pictures laminated so that I had multiple pictures of this same thing, which is a Bigfoot, a Bigfoot standing there, and a man standing side by side in a laminated picture. And the man would be wearing a blue fire department sweatshirt, which is the sweatshirt that I would wear every time I went down there, because most of the time I went down there, it was in the fall. So I was always wearing my fire department sweatshirt, easy to identify me as being the man in this picture with a blue long sleeve sweatshirt on with the yellow letters that says fire department. So, and I did that on purpose. I wanted to wear the same clothes all the time and to match these pictures, not knowing if anything would ever become of it. I even hung this picture in the woods on a tree, in just places that were really deep and dark. Just stick it on a tree. Just in my mind, thinking, what if they're walking through the woods? A Bigfoot is walking through the woods and happens to see this. Just tacked to a tree. Would it intrigue them? And the fact that I also put these out with my baits, I never knew if it would turn into anything worthwhile, but for me it was worth a risk, and maybe that contributed to the things that happened coming up. So let's go to the next one. All right, so here is another overview of the ridge, and it's got a couple of different. You can see the X down in the bottom part of the picture, which is our base camp, and you can see that circle, that yellow circle. That happened to be a spot where I had put some glow in the dark flowers up in a little alpine meadow that I found by accessing a game trail off of that logging road. I would go uphill to the top of that ridge, and there was just a very small patch of grass in there that was opened up, in a small field. And I set up a game camera, and I put these solar powered flowers that glow very soft lights, different colored lights for each flower. And I bought like 12 to 15 of these flowers, and I just kind of set them in this little field so that at night they would just kind of light up and kind of glow in different colors. Thinking it would be interesting if I was a Bigfoot walking around on top of a ridge and I came up on this field that had these very soft, gentle blue and pink and whatever soft lights these flowers were emanating. And I thought maybe, I could catch one with the game camera that way. But it looked really cool. So I was always taking people up there to look at them, especially after dark, wanting to go up there after dark so I could impress them with how cool it looked when you look out on that field and see those lights. And so I think the next picture I will show you is a game camera picture that I got from that particular setup. So here's the game cam picture of me actually up there showing some people the flowers, and you can see that I'm actually pointing at the camera, showing them where the camera was in relation to the flowers in this little open area up there in this little alpine field. The field wasn't any bigger than maybe somebody's front yard, if that size. I mean, it's hard to find an opening that size in those mountains with those type of trees and stuff. But there was enough of an opening where you could set these flowers up and have it be a really nice little spectacle. So I was very proud of that, and I kept taking people up there to show it to them, and we all thought it was interesting. All right, so now we're back to the overview of the area, and I want you to notice where the base camp area is all the way down there at the bottom of the picture. That X that's just north of that. That was the spot where on Thursday night other people arrived, uh, people that were there to prepare for the conference. So that's when the bulk of other people started to arrive and meeting us at our base camp. And I was still, every time somebody would show up, I'd be like, man, you want to go look at those flowers? And then we'd get in my Polaris and we'd zoom on up there and go through that process of taking them up there to see those flowers. Well, I believe it was Tom Powell who wrote the locals. He gave a presentation at this conference. So he was there. A gentleman named Mike Hall from Texas. He was a part of the TEXLA, Texas Louisiana a group. And so, both of these gentlemen hopped in the Polaris with me to go up and look at the flowers. And another one was Marvin Leeper. I believe he was a professor, and he was also speaking at the conference. So we had four of us. Myself, Mike Hall was in the passenger seat, and then Tom Powell and Marvin Leeper were in the back. It could seat four people. So we were heading up there to look at the flowers, and where you see that first X north of the campsite is where we found what's next. All right. Even though this is already disassembled, when we were pulling up the road there, or the logging road, there was a pile of rocks, maybe three rocks high, uh, and there was a white plastic under the very top rock. The very top rock had some white plastic under it. It turned out to be an Alco bag. And Alco is a small store that is in Tallahena, which is 17 miles from there or further. And so a little white bag that you would get from that store, it was an Alco bag, but and it had holes in it, so it was a ratty bag that was probably in the brush somewhere. Uh, and it was under a rock on the top of this rock cairn. And when I pulled up on it, it was kind of in the center of this logging road, so you couldn't go over the top of it without hitting it. And it wasn't there. It hadn't been there before. It hadn't been noticed before. And we were on that trail maybe 2 or 3 hours earlier, and clearly there was nothing there. And all of a sudden, it's there now. So I actually thought, and Mike Hall was sitting next to me, and I was just like, man, I said, somebody is messing with us. And I used the F word. I said, man, somebody's fucking with us. And I wasn't real happy about it. So I got out, and he was like, well, what if a Bigfoot did it? And of course we laughed, and it couldn't have been a Bigfoot. It had to have been a person. And so I was like, yeah, it's look at that. It's, they're probably getting mad because us people are so trashy because we leave trash laying everywhere. And it's like any other typical logging road where you can see a couple of beer cans and and some paper trash, and maybe this Alco bag trash. And so we were playing it off and making a big theatrical showing about, okay, Bigfoot, if you're looking, we'll clean up our trash. We're sorry. I'm sorry we're so trashy. And so I just kind of tossed the rock over to the side, grabbed the bag, and I just looked at it, and there was a piece of paper in the bottom of it. And so I just kind of scrunched it up and kicked the rest of the rocks over. And I made sure that I stuck my hand over my head and had the bag, the white trashy plastic bag, and I made a spectacle out of taking it back to the Polaris and shoving it behind the seat. I didn't want to toss it off to the side because we were pretending like we were trying to clean up trash, if that's what it was telling us by having it out there to clean up trash. So I made a big deal out of that. I was like, okay, yeah, okay, I'm putting it in the Polaris. No big deal. We're cleaning up the trash, and then we just kind of laughed it off because at that point it was just kind of a joke. And so we go on up to the ridge, and so we go on up to the ridge and look at the flowers. Uh, And when we come back down to the trail after going up and looking at the flowers, I was like, well, I said, we can go back the way we came, or we can go on down, we can keep going forward and then just go on down to the paved road, and then just cut back all the way to the lower part of the logging road that goes up to the base camp. And they all said, well, let's just keep going forward rather than going back the area that we'd already came. So you can see that second X. See the circle? That's the field. That circle is the field that had the flowers in it. See? And then that X above that, that's actually going downhill down the ridge. And that next X is where we find a second pile of rocks. Now this here is also after the pile of rocks had started to be disassembled. But we pull up on this next pile of rocks, and this is where I'm like, okay, this is weird. I said, there's something going on here. I said, somebody is really messing with us. And why are they, what's the significance of piling these rocks up, in our way? So since the first one was didn't have much significance, this time Mike Hall got out. So he got out at the passenger side of my Polaris, and I had the headlights on, which was lighting it all up. And he goes, and it's about 3 rocks high, and so he starts to disassemble it. And when he gets to the bottom one, there's a cubby hole in there, and he he goes, "Hey man, check it out." And he reaches down and he pulls up this walkie-talkie by the antenna. And when he pulled it up into the view of my headlights, I went cold. The hair on the back of my neck raised up, and I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Mike," I said, "you are not going to believe this." And he goes, "What?" I said, "4 days ago, we lost a walkie-talkie." I said, "We're missing a walkie-talkie from 4 days ago because this was Thursday night when this happened, and we had lost it on a Monday night." So he was like, "No way." And I was like, "No." I said, "Mate," I said, "we got to go back to camp and see and talk to Roy to find out if this is Roy's walkie-talkie." So we hopped in the Polaris and we flew back to camp. I mean, we hightailed it to camp. It was very exciting at this point, and we got into camp, and Roy was sitting there in the chair by the campfire, and I said, "Roy," I said, "where's your walkie-talkie?" And he pulls it out of his pocket. And he said, "Right here." And I said, "Man," I said, "is this your other one?" And I held it up, and he took it and looked at it and compared them, and he was like, "Yeah." He said, "Where'd you find it?" And that was it. I was like, "You are not going to believe this." And I told him everything that happened. We found the rock cairn, and the walkie-talkie was in that cubby hole at the base of it. Didn't make any sense. How in the world, who could have even known that we had lost a walkie-talkie other than me, Dave, Roy, and there was another couple, somebody and their son was with us, but yeah, I mean, the only ones who even went to look for the walkie-talkie was Dave and Roy, and these old farts were. I mean, there's no way they messed with us. They just wouldn't do it. It didn't make any sense because they were just as gobsmacked as we were at this point. So we were very excited about it. As a matter of fact, we went at camp that night. We took some walkie-talkies and we taped the mics open, and then we went riding around on trails and pretended to lose them, and then we'd run back to camp and listen to them, try to listen to them on with the other walkie-talkies, hoping something would pick them up, trying to recreate what we'd already done. We didn't know the dynamics of walkie-talkies, that they don't stay mic'd open for very long. When you tape them open like that, after just 5 or 6 seconds, they shut off. So, but we didn't know that. We thought we were going to trick them really good and pretend to lose walkie-talkies and hope that they would pick them up and we could hear them talking or something. So it was kind of silly, but 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 we're still trying to do that. So the next day was the conference, and so we're at the conference and we are talking about this incident. Still, we were standing around talking about it, and we even talked about it at the presentation uh, at the conference, and told everything that happened, because we were like, "Man, that if a Bigfoot returned this, that it's amazing. It's amazing." So we had this talk at the conference, and the walkie-talkie was all we talked about in the rock cairn. So it was only after that I was in the back talking to somebody and just rehashing the situation over and over again. And then the first rock pile that we dealt with that night came to my mind, and I was like, if a Bigfoot left that walkie-talkie, I said, that first rock pile, then nobody was messing with us with that rock pile. So I went to my Polaris, and I still had that Alco bag shoved in behind the driver's seat, the bench seat, just shoved back in there. And I reached down in there and I pulled it out and I looked at it, and what at the bottom of that Alco bag, which was that white piece of paper that I thought was a receipt, I flipped it over and it was a photograph. So it was one of Dave's photographs that didn't even register till that moment that we even had a photograph in that bag, because I thought, because it was upside down and it was white, thought it was a receipt, just thought it was trash. Uh, so how can even we didn't even know we lost a photograph. All we knew is there was one on the foot peg, and Dave said he didn't know he had that jacket that had all of those photographs in the pocket. But that's the only conversation we had about those photographs on Monday after the walkie-talkie went missing. So we didn't know that there was really even a photograph missing. Just because there was one on his foot peg doesn't mean that he lost one anywhere else. But clearly he did lose one, and he lost one in a fashion that something was probably following us, because we were going slow to that first campsite that first night on Monday. And by the time we were up there, it's probably midnight, because we were unloading the trucks and stuff around 11. So when we were tootling along in a caravan, going very slow, through those wet creeks and dry creeks and ruts and hills, and all the way back, 2 or 3, 4 miles to that first campsite. So we weren't going fast because there was a whole line of us. And so if we were being followed and trailed, could they have just easily snatched up the 2 items that we lost? And you would think that if somebody was messing with us, there's other trash. There's other trash on those trails from hunters and other campers and stuff. That how would they differentiate between what is a piece of trash that somebody else has discarded on any of those trails, and be the trash that we discarded on that trail, unless they watched it fall, unless they were following us and saw it with their own eyes. That's the only thing that makes sense to me. So here's the next picture. So here's the next picture showing after I went out at the conference and dug the bag out behind my seat, and that's the photograph I was holding in my fingers, and there's the bag in my left hand, the Alco bag. And of course, showed it to Dave. Dave pulled out his other pictures, or compared it to his other pictures, and saw that it was indeed one of the pictures in his pocket. So that's the moment we knew that he indeed lost a picture also. So it was just fascinating when you think about all of the things that had to happen in order for that to be found in a way. And so it makes you think. You go back to where those X's were found on the trails, and you say, was that where the items were lost? Because the walkie-talkie was found on the downhill side of the little alpine meadow where I had my flowers, and then the photograph was found, an eighth of a mile on the other side, heading back in the other direction. So even though that was clearly on the trail that we took the first night that we came in, both of those items were found on the trail that we traversed that first night in our caravan of ATVs and Polaris. So, but is that the exact spot that they were lost at? I don't know. Maybe. Well, I don't know how else to explain it. Why would they separate the two? Why wouldn't they put both of them in the same rock cairn? The fact that they are separated, and separated by such distance, maybe that's exactly where they were lost, and and picked up or found or whatever, but held on to for 4 days before presenting back to us in a format of a gifting rock that Native Americans, I believe, used to use. So there's a lot to think about there, a lot to chew on. Uh, very, very fascinating. Now, here is the last picture I want to show you of that general area. It's the aerial view right above the whole thing. As a matter of fact, I've got numbers written in red. The number 1 there at the bottom, that's the base camp area. The number 2, that's behind my picture, I believe. Oh yeah, number 2 is right up there below where the logging road kind of goes up the hill. The first part there, that's where the old dumpsters were located. And at the time, there were dumpsters on side of the road, and there were lots of trails coming down from that area to these dumpsters. And I did hear a report from somebody that saw a Bigfoot run from those dumpsters up the ridge on one of those trails behind the dumpsters, and right above those dumpsters, going straight up, is that logging road where the X was found, that had the walkie-talkie. So that's at least close proximity to those dumpsters. Uh, the next number, I believe, is number three, and number three right there is a friend of mine who I've spoke to that built a cabin right there, and he has a nice story to tell. While he was staying in a tent on the weekends there, while he was building his cabin, it took him a year or so to get his cabin built, a log cabin. So he had some things happen while in a tent there on that property. And then just east of that, the next number, uh, that's the Humphreys cabin. Everybody knows the Humphreys cabin, where the incident where they shot one, and they claimed that these Bigfoots were coming in from across the road, which would be this ridge area where I've been camping. So if their story has any truth, they're saying that they're coming down from the hills across the road from where they live, which is right on these ridges and areas where we've got all this, where the walkie-talkies have been returned, where we caught the Ridgewalker video, all of these things. And I've got other incidents that I'm going to explain later on different YouTubes of what I've had happen up on this ridge. So and there you've got the Christ 40 acres down there, and that's where we unloaded and came out from. But it's very interesting. Uh, we're only about 30 miles, or not 30 miles. We're probably 20 miles or less as the crow flies from the North America Wood Ape Conservancy. Uh, we're dealing with them in a different way here than they're dealing with them there. They're very aggressively chasing and shooting, and you know, sure they're documenting a lot of things, but I don't know if I agree with their aggressiveness with treating these beings. So here we are having these interesting interactions and probable and possible happenings with these things because of a more friendly nature of observance and interaction, where we're allowing ourselves to be viewed and watched and admired, if you will. I mean, surely they're curious about us. We're curious about them too. So I hope you enjoy this. I've got more stories coming up. I've got other incidents on this ridge, and I've got something up in Washington that involves a bluff charge. I want to show locations. I want you to hear audios. I want you to see pictures, and I'm going to do the Chickasaw Park where I had the encounter with two. I'm going to do that in this format where I show you pictures of everything, where I got pictures and where everything happened, and try to do all these details in this type of format where you can see maps and drawn pictures and things like that. So I'm going to leave you with one thing to read, uh, kind of an encouragement, if you will, before I sign off. And thank you.